Assalamu alaikum. Well, today we're joined by my illustrious cousin, Omer Farid. And if you guys don't know, he actually has his own channel, and he actually had me on there as well. And now, fortunately, luckily enough, we have him here today on the podcast. So tell us, Omer, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling pretty good actually. Yeah. And firstly, thanks for having me on here. I'm honored to be your first guest.
Oh no, for sure. Like I'm honored to have you as well on here.
Appreciate that.
So where are you joining us from?
I'm joining in from Texas.
Oh, really? Okay. How is it over there?
I used to really not like Texas. I used to actually hate it quite a bit. I thought it was rather gray, but
Really?
I began to kind of like I became more acquainted with the people in my own city and with the other cities, and I've suddenly fallen in love with the place. So I like Texas.
Okay. I like that. I like that. So you like adapted yourself to the environment.
I don't know if those are the words I'd use necessarily, but yeah, I like it here.
Okay. That's interesting. Because I do know that Texas does tend to have a pretty big like Muslim population. And people there are very nice from what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah to both of that.
Yeah.
Yeah to both of that. I don't know if I've ever said that, but yes, yes to both of those statements.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be grammatically correct. It's fine.
I try to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm curious. What inspired you to begin this podcast?
What inspired me? I would say it's, you know, not to sound too flamboyant, I guess, but I would say like I saw like a lot of people, and it's like something I've been wanting to do for a while. But the reason I wanted to do it is because um, obviously like I was too much trying to be too perfect with things, right? Trying to have like the right equipment, like right camera, right like microphone, like everything, right? But then I realized like perfection, like if you're trying to be too perfect, like it doesn't exist, right? So it's kind of like the paradox. Well, I don't know paradox, but it's like the fallacy essentially that try to reach for perfection, you'll never get there. So you'll never start essentially. So I decided that the best thing to do is to start, and the reason to start is that I feel like I've experienced like I would say I'm pretty experienced in life with certain things. So why not share that wisdom online with other people as well? And hopefully I can make their lives better as well as my own. And
Hmm.
it's like a mutual type of thing, where, you know, as much as people can bash like social media, you know, there's a benefit to it. And I feel like I have benefited from it, so why can't I give back? You know what I mean?
Hmm. It's very interesting you mentioned this. Firstly, I like that you're doing this, because a lot of times people talk or people have ideas, but not so many actually take action. So you're taking action, and that's admirable. What I wanted to mention was I'd recently seen the Elvis film, and that was rather flamboyant.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, at first I didn't really like it. I thought it was a bit goofy, a bit cartoony, but after reflecting, I realized I actually really do like that film. The reason I
Okay.
like it is because when you witness Elvis's story, you see time and time again, things really didn't go the way he wanted them to. Like a lot of times, life chewed him up. He was beaten and broken too many times, but he kept going through that. He kept moving through the struggle. He had a lot of visions, a lot of ideas that weren't 100% perfectly realized, but he still pursued them. And in that pursuit, you can see that like he tried. He sincerely tried. And he's remembered for what he did. Like it wasn't perfect by his standards, but he's remembered for it. And it's rather inspiring. So
I like that.
I think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like obviously you try your best to be as perfect as you can, but if you're not going anywhere, then maybe you should stop pursuing it that hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
And
something
just
I was
do it.
thinking of. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, no, I was just saying just do it instead of just waiting.
Yes, yes. Something you had just mentioned right now, it reminded me of like Van Gogh, and his entire life, the world really just spit at him. Nobody really believed in him. And no matter how hard he tried, it just never seemed to be going in his direction. And now, fortunately for him, it has, but he doesn't even know that. I mean, he was at his deathbed before any of this became. I mean, when you think of great artists, you think of Van Gogh, but no, he would never know that. He never got to see that. So I think his story is one of those like I don't know, it's endearing in its own ways.
It's unfortunate type of thing, right?
I suppose so. Yeah, it really makes a person have to ponder about their own life and the trajectory in which they wish to
That's
take
true.
it.
It's interesting you mentioned Vincent Van Gogh because I just remembered I'm sure you probably heard of Conor McGregor, right? Who's like a very big MMA star. I mean, he was like a double champ and everything, right? And even he had a quote like Vincent Van Gogh, where he said, I've lost my mind in this game, like Vincent Van Gogh. So, do you think trying to remember the full quote, I've lost my mind in this game, Vincent Van Gogh. I've dedicated myself to this art, you know. That's basically what he's saying is that, in a sense that, you have to literally be obsessed with something, right? And then when you're obsessed with something, it's like you will take that action. You know what I mean? Instead of just waiting for things to be right.
So where are you taking that?
Well, basically where I'm taking it is that like the whole thing is with obsession, it's like or yeah, basically it's something you really want to do. But like if you just wait for perfection, right? The goal is to get as close as possible. But obviously like it's impossible to literally reach it because perfection is essentially infinite, right? There's always something that you can do better,
Yes.
right? But but like the thing is, when you're obsessed, you don't stop, right? That's
Mm,
essentially what I'm saying. That was obsession, right? And like people who say that's not good, well, whether you like it or not, you're obsessed with something, right? It could be something really good or something very bad, right? Or something you might just be obsessed with mediocrity,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. A lot of
we're all obsessed
people,
with something.
yeah, a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't have time to do that." I don't know how you do that. I don't have time for that. But it's like if you examine, their average ordinary day life, right? And that includes all of us really. It's really just a matter of choice. You could just sit down on the couch and have some sodas with your boys, or you could just, glue yourself to your phone watching Disney Plus or, social media or whatnot. Or you could take action and do something. Or you could, carve out some time for a book, create something, learn something. So I think it really just factors down to choices, you know. Yeah. Because even those like menial things, right? Like, because we're talking about obsession. I mean, habits are essentially an obsession, aren't they?
Yeah,
Maybe not like consciously, but they are an obsession to a particular lifestyle. So I can see it in that regard.
yeah, that's 100% true. It's yeah, I mean, what you said is that you have to make the time for it. And unfortunately it's like, people who have the time to like, you know, play video games, right? Or watch like binge watch Netflix or like whatever it is. I mean, and in moderation that stuff can be fine. But in a way, like if you're doing it for so many hours, it's like, you are obsessed with that. And then you wonder why. things are not going that well when you should be obsessed with this other thing that would be more beneficial. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is in today's day and age, so many of us have sacrificed ourselves at the altar of distraction. And it's like that's really tragic because I imagine throughout history people had time to just do nothing and to just think. You just kind of sit there in silence or sit there in the presence of other people. Now it's like you have to be in front of a screen, whether that's like your phone or your TV or your computer, and it's like that's how life operates. Like myself, I'm just thinking like it's been a fat minute since I just sat there alone with like a piece of paper and pen. And I usually love to write. It's been a minute, man. You know, I've been so caught up in the distractions. And yeah, I think that's rather sad, really. I think it's antagonistic, I think, to what humans are capable of doing.
What do you mean by like antagonistic? Like what do you mean by that? Like essentially like how are you relating it?
Russell Brand says something interesting that, you know, all these screens, anytime you pick up your phone, it is inviting the worst parts of yourself, right? Your lower self. So when you're, you know, on your phone, what's being invited there is like your boredom, right? Mindlessness, your tiredness, your laziness, lust, anger, greed, even, you know, people, I would even say gluttony to some extent. Like it's the worst aspects of yourself that are being called onto. And I think that's antagonistic, right? Because the seven deadly sins or, you know, the vices, whatever it is, um, that's not conducive to a person's growth. So in that sense, I think it's antagonistic. It doesn't improve your integrity, at least in my anecdotal opinion.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned something about like how people in the past, like historically, probably just had to sit there and like, there obviously were no screens or anything that they could like, it's like to an extent it's okay to learn from other people, but at the same time it's like if you're always on your phone, you're learning from someone else, and that could either be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's like so much misinformation. It's like how can you really be sure? You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I try
or
to
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You know,
No,
sticking like a Confucius quote onto like Rumi or vice
yeah,
versa, and just overstimulation, and it's like it
yeah,
it doesn't
no, that's
help.
true. You know, funny enough, I was listening to an audiobook, and it was by Ryan Holiday's "Stillness is the Key." Like literally, what you're mentioning is in that book, and like how literally just being like still and thinking, deeply
Hmm.
about things. Essentially, it's like it's very important as human beings, right? Obviously, like in the modern like Western like world, they've kind of related to meditation, right? Which can be somewhat of an eccentric view, right? But it's like to an extent, like I can kind of see what they mean, you know what I mean? But obviously, like Islamically, we also have like Salah, right? Which can also be, you know, it's like a reminder of that, you know what I mean?
Yes. Um, what you're saying is making me think about this what we've been discussing is making me think about Puriturnus. And if you don't know what Puriturnus is, in Jungian psychology, it means, you know, child God, or in modern terms, like man child. And I think that Puriturnus is a thing that needs to be slain inside of a person in order for them to grow. It's not a dragon, it's not a serpent, it's its own category. It's kind of like a snitch, I would say, in like the Harry Potter Quidditch game. That small little thing that if you capture it, the game's over, and the one that seizes it, that team wins. So in other words, it's very unique, it's very evasive, but that thing needs to be slain. And I think in a way it is like a personification of those seven deadly sins, the vices. Um, yeah.
It's interesting. Kind of have to think about that. So, you mentioned the Harry Potter like thing about how it's kind of reminding me of football a little bit, somewhat. Not, su- I don't, I haven't watched it in so long, so I can't be exactly sure. But the way you're talking about like how you have to grab something, or because of how hard it is to get, right? You could kind of relate that to life as well. It's like, you know, your aspirations and the life that you want to live, right? Right. It is very hard to attain and grasp, but obviously, you go in the wrong directions, you won't be able to get it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from the Alexander movie, which is, "Oh, we reach, we fall." And I like that quote. Anytime he says that, Colin Farrell, "We reach, we fall." It's man's story, eh?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, obviously, like when you examine the life of Alexander the Great himself, it's like he, like as much as he gained, like in terms of conquest, he also did lose things on the way as well, such as like his father, right? And then there's obviously like instances of him losing his friends, right? Right, and even his soldiers, of course. So it's like when you sometimes gain a victory, you might lose something as well. It's kind of like that just sounds super edgy, but it's kind of like the universe balancing itself, right?
Yes, actually, I really like how you mentioned this because recently on my podcast, I discussed with one of my friends how over the summer, for such a long time, I felt like a cooped up artist, right? I had a lot of ideas and visions inside of my head and within my soul, but I never quite manifested them into reality. And it was only in this past summer that I actually took those visions and ideas and I put them out into the real world. And when I was able to do that, it was liberating, it was freeing. The way I put it was, once I freed the pigeon, it allowed for the eagle to manifest, right? Eagle being a symbol of freedom. So I totally see that. But here's the thing: as a because I've been liberated or freed from that, I feel more stiff. I feel more rigid. I feel more adult, so to speak. Whereas before I was more charismatic, more loose, more lofty. So it feels in a way like you did have to trade something or sacrifice something. Or it's like you've left a piece of yourself, a part of yourself behind. Something along those lines.
That's interesting. I like how you mentioned like a personal experience as well, like how you know literally like you gain something, but then you kind of have to sacrifice something else, right?
Yeah. And in a way, it's interesting because it wasn't consciously done,
Yeah,
But the way I put it for myself personally is I see it kind of like the death of pure eternus within me. That's how I would articulate it.
it's interesting you keep mentioning that. You've
Yeah,
clearly
it's,
studied the literature.
would you say?
Said you've clearly studied the literature.
I would hope to, or yeah, I like to think I have, but it's something that has been on my mind for some time now. It's just an interesting concept.
Yeah, that's true. Would you say, what's kind of like interesting I find is that is in the Western world, it seems like meditation seems to be like this big thing, and like everyone supposedly meditates. But like me personally, when people ask me if I meditate, I mean, personally, like I don't. You know what I mean? Because not to get all religious and whatnot, but I feel like Salah, this prayer, I feel like it basically does that and more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Do you think you have personally meditated or no?
It's funny. I think I tried like maybe two times when I was 17. Um, I think it just goes back to that thing we were talking about, the silence. Like you just kind of need that silence. So maybe the word meditation to some people might be like taboo, but I think like a moment of silence, I think all human beings need that. And I think prayer can offer that because it's a moment of self-reflection.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like the only problem with how do I say this? Like baseless meditation is that it's like there's no center of focus essentially, right? It's just you're
Mm,
sitting there. And I don't know, like in a way, it's like there's no center of focus and it's not based on anything. It's kind of like, again, like you're being unproductive as well. So it's like, at the same time, it's like, I feel like with prayer, essentially, like you would have that center of focus, right? Because you obviously know, or at least like Islamically, that God would be that center of focus, right? And just focusing on that, you know, rather than letting your mind just drift off into things.
I think I don't know if all, meditation traditions promote this, but I know that there certainly are a handful, many that they kind of like they promote this idea of focusing on like a mantra or a chant or something.
Yeah,
There was a Dharmic teacher, I don't remember who exactly, it might have been Alan Watts, who discusses how like this is just that's not the way to go because it's kind of like I don't remember the exact articulation that they had, but it's something along the lines of what you're saying, where it's baseless. It's more so a concentration on something, for lack of better words, baseless, than it is something like real and true and present in the moment.
yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I just find it very interesting that you know, I think I had a quote somewhere like it was like, you know, meditation is just the edgy man's way of praying.
Hmm. I think it was Mark Twain who said something like, "It's easier to fool people than to make them believe that they've been fooled."
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. Funny enough, I actually did read a book that like it was talking about meditation, but I'm trying to think of like the book's name. I can't remember it. But basically like it was like he was talking about like the author, right? Like apparently it was like some monk that like went to India, right? Some like white man that went to India and he essentially learned from the monks over there, right? And there was this exercise that I remember it was like looking at the flower and trying to focus on that. But it's like I feel like that's not like it's not something I feel like would be like practical because it's like, you know, just looking at a flower and staring at it for 45 minutes. I mean, I feel like it would not be as productive as, you know, focusing on something a little bit more divine.
I think it was Jordan Peterson who discussed in one of his conversations that um, beauty is something that catches the eye. And I really liked the way he put that. And the example he used was about Moses in the burning bush. And he's like, Moses is just kind of like minding his business, but then the burning bush catches his attention. You know, that beauty catches his attention. It's not like you kind of look at a thing. I mean, you can look at a thing and look for the beauty in it, right? Like a flower. But I think like real beauty it catches your attention. Um, so I guess in some sense I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
I mean, in a way, I feel like, you know, essentially, I feel like the stillness idea, I feel like one, like, I feel like it should be productive, right? Right. Because at the same time, as nice as it is to sit there and do nothing, in the real world, you have to do something, right?
Yeah, well, which is I'm glad you mentioned this as well because Alan Watts in his book Become What You Are, he actually discusses how a person should not like go into something or become something because like I don't know if this is a specific example he used, but the example goes a person shouldn't just become a monk because they feel like they're not good enough for the world or whatever. Like they feel like they can't survive in the world. It's like that should not be your exit or your that shouldn't be your safety net. Like, oh,
Yeah,
I feel like I can't really survive in the world, so I'm gonna become a monk. I'm gonna live this monastic life. He's like, no, if you're gonna become a monk because that's like something that you intentionally want to do because you have like that sort of idea of a perfect idea of a purpose, conviction to that. Um, so in terms of like that practicality thing, I could kind of see a connection there.
yeah. Plus, it's like the one thing I feel like because I like about Salah, the prayer, right, is that at least Islamically, it's like very short. At most, it's like 10 minutes, right? And like if you could do it in less than like 5 minutes too, right? Or if you really want to do it, you can do it for a very long time too. So it's like I like that aspect of convenience, right? And it's something that you do consistently, you know. Ideally, obviously, 5 times a day, right?
What do you think is the most intimate moment of Salah for the believer?
I feel like the submission aspect of it, right?
No,
Because
I said like what part of the prayer do you think is the most
oh, I
intimate?
would say something called sujood, which basically just means prostration, right? Where your
Like
head
bowing
is,
down, right?
yes, where your head is literally on the ground.
Yeah. There's this interesting thing I wanted to mention. I have phases. Well, I never really had any reverence for any of the prophets, but then I kind of became a little more opened up to the story of Moses, and from Moses it went to Joseph, and from Joseph to Jacob, then to Christ, and now I'm really fascinated by the story of Zechariah. And
Oh,
what
really?
I find really fascinating about the story of Zechariah is when he visits Mary and he sees that, you know, God's angels have brought her this sustenance, you know, these fruits and whatnot. He's just so impressed. He's so amazed. And he's like, wow, you know, God could do this for her. Like, God could do anything for me. And so he gets into his little corner and he's standing there and he's praying to God. But here's the interesting part. Or no, sorry, let me so he's praying because he's an old man and his wife's an old woman and they desperately want a child, right? Um so he's praying to God for this child. But the interesting part is he's not doing it in the most intimate moment. He's not doing it bowing down. He's doing it, if I'm not mistaken, like standing up. And in this moment, we're just reciting prayers that are glorifying God. So he's in a state of just glorifying God, not in that intimate moment where he could ask for whatever he wants exactly. So I find that very interesting where it's like it's in the moment that say if I'm not mistaken that God likes the most that he's asking for this. And of course, you know, God does grant him the son. But just that patience, that optimism, that hopefulness, um, I really like that. And I think yeah, it's a very interesting thing to me when it comes to prayer.
Actually, like that, yeah. Because it's like in prayer, there is a certain patience, right? It's
Hmm.
not that necessarily you're going to guaranteed what you ask for, per se, right? Because maybe what you're asking for may not be best for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's more so for yourself, right? You're trying to clear your own mind.
Yeah. Well, see, that's another interesting thing about that story, right? Where it's like we oftentimes have this thing like, yeah, like it's for you, which it is, right? It is for you, it's for your benefit. It is to give you that relief and whatnot. But then that thing about the story of Zechariah where it's like, as much as he wants what he wants, he's so connected to that moment where It's more about God than it is about him. And I think that's just really interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. Yeah, I guess in a way it's like kind of selfless, right? Like you're trying to please God more than trying to just please yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really just that like that patience and optimism. It's beautiful stuff. Stellar stuff.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just the difference between like, prayer and meditation is that prayer is based on something, whereas meditation tends to be not based on anything.
Yeah. You know, that connection clicks a lot more now that we've had that little discussion. What you were saying, that
Yeah,
connection clicks a lot more. I think I see what you're saying.
yeah. I mean, what's interesting about meditation is that a lot of people who aren't even religious do it, which I find really very strange because it's like deep down, like, their life is like a mess, right? So it's like they're looking for something to give them hope. And it's like when they meditate, it's like it gives them temporary hope, right? It's like a temporary fix, right? It's kind of like putting duct tape on a leaking faucet, right? Like that's not gonna fix it, you know. Or actually,
Mm,
putting duct tape on a dam, right? Eventually,
mm.
you can't like stop it from bursting, right? And it'll destroy the city, right? So it's kind of like you're just putting these, band-aids, duct tape, or whatever you want to call them, on temporary problems, right? When you should be applying a real solution, like Salah. Or, like just in general, like concept of Tawheed, which basically just means monotheism, just that God consciousness within yourself, right? So
Taqwa,
even when
yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
praying, like it still goes through your head, right? It's because with meditation, it's like however long you do it, you're gonna forget it, right? But if you have that Tawheed, that taqwa, the God consciousness, it will remain with you.
Yes.
Because the difference between that, with Salah and meditation, is that one is more applied into your life because it's more practical.
Yeah.
So, do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, yeah, good question, man. Good question. I guess I just go back to that Elvis thing I was discussing. You know, Elvis had so many visions, so many ideas, so many hopes and dreams, and life really chewed him up. It really beat him up. It really broke him. But he kept going, and he kept trying, and he held on to whatever scraps of sincerity he had. And he did what he did, and we remember that. So I would say, a lot of times what holds people back in trying to become themselves, so to speak, is they feel like they lack that perfection. And I mean, Elvis the King, hey, he had that happen to him so many times, but he kept going. And more of him became revealed to him, you know. And I really admire that because in that there is a great aspect of liberation. So I suppose that's what I'd say, like um don't limit yourself so much. Don't repress yourself.
Yeah,
Perfection is unattainable, but we can always strive. And it is in that striving, it is in that struggle that we can become better acquainted with ourselves and with others. So I suppose that's something along the lines of my closing thoughts.
I like that. It's kind of like I think I said this on your podcast too. Funny enough, that a man trying or tempting is the bravest thing he can do, right?
Hmm.
As well as I remember this quote. It was like, I guess I'll finish off with this: is that uh, the place that's filled with the most dreams is the graveyard.
Yeah, yeah,
So if you don't live out your dreams, where do they go? They go with you in the grave.
yeah. The unsung songs.
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. I mean, but I was very honored to have you on my podcast. And I hope to have you again on here someday,
Yeah,
inshallah.
inshallah. I'm very honored to have been here, to have been your first guest. I think it was a rather fruitful conversation. A lot of things that I myself have to reflect on, you know?
Yeah, as well as I do. You know, but I'm very glad that you were on here, and for all of you that are watching, don't forget to like and subscribe. So we can keep making more content. But until next time, assalamu alaikum.
Problem song.